In this ExploreVM Podcast short, I talk VMware Project Pacific with Ken Nalbone of Tech Field Day. All right, we are back once again, VMworld 2019. This time I have I believe, is this your first time on the podcast?
I believe it is.
All right, well, please introduce yourself.
I'm Ken Nalbone. You can find me on @KenNalbone at Twitter. On the Twitters, I lead Tech Field Day events, specifically Cloud Field Day, some of the Tech Field Day events, and some of our Tech Field Day extra events as well.
Excellent, and I've known Ken for a long time through VMUG and various social medias. Mm-hmm. I've also been fortunate enough to be a delegate at the most recent Tech Field Day here at VMworld.
Yes, you have.
And actually, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Project Pacific.
Yeah, the announcement from VMware this week at VMworld that they're tightly integrating Kubernetes within vSphere, not just running on top of it, but it is a part of the construct. And we heard a lot about it during Tech Field Day this week. It was really cool. I like it when we get to be the first to see an announcement. And what struck me about Project Pacific was now that it is deep within vSphere, and we're seeing vSphere pop up in every major public cloud, what the ramifications are for VMware and everybody out there who wants to use Kubernetes. Everybody wants to use Kubernetes, right? All the developers do. None of them want to manage it. No. I mean, it's a pain. There's really no added value in that. So they go out and they find a service on AWS or Azure or GCP. They all have something, right? But they're all different. So you have to learn that implementation. And, APIs are APIs. And if you use one, you could probably use the others. But there's probably going to be some differentiating factors to take into account. But with it being within vSphere and vSphere being available on every public cloud, I feel like people aren't talking about the fact that now you have one unified Kubernetes distribution that will perform the exact same way regardless of where you want to run it. And I think that's huge. I don't know about you. And if you, what were your impressions, Paul, yesterday in the session?
So I'm actually, I'll admit that I'm fairly new to the whole Kubernetes world. It's absolutely something I have to dive into more now with the announcements.
Mm-hmm. We all do.
But I was intrigued by the fact that during the keynotes they were saying it gets 30 times better performance in
30%.
30% better.
30 times would be astounding.
Well, actually, at the keynote they said 30 better performance. They didn't actually qualify.
Is that right? Okay, yeah. maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is astounding.
No, because in the session we had for Tech Field Day they did say 30%.
That's
you are correct. Okay. 30% better performance running Kubernetes on vSphere versus running it in a virtual machine, and 8% better than running it on bare metal. And that kind of surprised me.
That was telling.
And I was like, how are they even doing this? And thankfully, because I was like, BS, qualify this number for me. Because how are you running faster than bare metal? And it's because of the scheduler built into ESXi. It's better than the whatever is built into the Linux that you run your Kubernetes on. And that I thought, I was like, okay, now we're making sense. Now we're seeing where we can get some better performance. We're seeing better leaps and bounds in the technology.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting, they were talking about how it's going to be native in vSphere, and I'm like, how can you do that? The ESXi kernel has not been Linux for years now. They started out in the early days, basically making it Linux. And I don't know if you know about it, there was a whole lawsuit with the Linux Foundation trying to get every last bit of Linux code out of there. And so basically VMware acquiesced eventually that they were going to do that. They settled. And so there's no Linux in the VMware kernel at all. And so I was like, well, how can you run Kubernetes, which basically runs on the Linux kernel? And, they talked about that in the field day session. Yeah. It technically is a very small VM, but is kind of like a VM that starts before anything else. Yeah. It's part of their, what was it? The VPXD is the built-in hypervisor kernel, right? So what did they call it in the session? CPXD or something like that? Like kubelet something? Yeah,
they called it a spherelet.
Spherelet.
Yeah.
Basically, it's like a tiny VM that's barely even a VM.
Yeah.
And that's what the Kubernetes distribution will run on top of. I just thought that was really cool. And so it might be a bit of a cheat. It's not native in the vSphere kernel, but it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So they've clearly spent some time on the engineering behind it and made sure that it is efficient and it is very logical. And the fact that you can actually look at your containers inside your vSphere like a virtual machine. Like that I find is pretty interesting as well.
But I think the ramifications for all the developers who want to run Kubernetes, but they don't want to be dictated to which cloud they can run it in, now will have the option, as long as you're a large enough enterprise, it's like, well, yeah, because we can run VMware solutions on Azure now, and Google's coming, and AWS has been there for such a long time, that that will be a possibility for many enterprise shops. The little guys, they probably still can't afford whatever the buy-in is going to be for VMware Cloud on AWS or Azure.
Right,
but
right.
I think that the larger ramifications for the larger development teams now and their operations teams or DevOps teams can support them much more easily natively is a big deal.
Yeah, and I see clients around. So I'm from Wisconsin. I see clients that are forward-looking that are like, well, we really need to dive into this whole world of containers and automation and DevOps. And I also see clients that are, no, just on-premises. We're not going anywhere. And I think the fact that you can now do this within vSphere is going to make it a little bit easier for, obviously, the clients that want to dive that way. Awesome, it's right there for you. But those who are like, no, we're not going to do it, they'll show them how easy it can be. And it's going to open up more options for, say, their internal development team to kind of get out of that old school mentality of, no, this is how we do it, this is how we've done it. Just having that natively built in, I think, is going to be a big step forward.
It's going to be a big step forward. It's the first major change in vSphere since its inception in terms of how you run workloads, right?
Right.
So it's been V everything forever. We're part of the V community. We're V admins. What are we going to be now? Are we going to be the K admins or the VK admins? Or
yeah. V Kubernetes.
The VK8S world now.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see where that's going.
Right. Real quick, obviously we've had VMware Cloud on AWS for a while. Now we're looking at VMware on Azure. I'm starting to see a little bit of exposure out there in the wild to customers using VMware Cloud on AWS.
Yes.
What's your stance on these iterations? Is this like a great move? Is this a stopgap?
It's a great move for VMware because they wanted to be on any cloud, any application, any device. Back in the day, they didn't actually have a way to do that, and
Right.
now they do. And it's also big for the enterprise that doesn't want to necessarily refactor all their applications. Everybody says if you're going to go to the cloud, you should go cloud native. Yeah, that kind of makes sense, except for all these enterprises that have shelfware. They didn't write it themselves.
Right.
They're not going to put it in a container because it doesn't make sense. But they don't want to build a data center out anymore. So in those use cases, it's very relevant. I'm seeing a lot of interest in it from customers. And then the flexibility that you have now, because there are a lot of customers who just love Azure because Microsoft really understands enterprises in their opinion, that they like all the native tools. They're already in Office 365. They like Azure AD. If they can continue using Azure services with their existing workloads, well, then they're all in. So I think it's cool. I think it will take off. I think it is basically what VMware needed to do to maintain relevancy, frankly.
Yeah.
The data center is not going anywhere, but it certainly is shrinking.
Right.
And they needed a play. Frankly, they're not getting any new customers. And even now, they're still not getting any new customers, but this is a great way for them to retain their customers.
Right.
All the enterprises that were going to be on vSphere are on vSphere. Any company that's now growing to be an enterprise is probably already cloud native, and they're not going to make that shift. They have no reason to. But this is how VMware stays a part of that game.
Absolutely. With all the recent acquisitions by VMware, that's something I've touched on with a couple of my guests. I think it was like 6 or 7 so far this year. What are your thoughts on all of these acquisitions? It seems like a lot of money is being spent, and a lot of new features are coming in.
Simply put, VMware is not innovating anymore. They're acquiring. That's just kind of the stage of these tech companies in the enterprise. That's just the way they are. So it's not surprising. They need to find ways to maintain the interest of their customers beyond just virtualization, and this is how they do it. I mean, it's not surprising to me at all. And I wish them good luck. The more they can integrate into vSphere, good for them.
Right.
They really want to go after the developer audience. And they've had several false starts with internal projects, but now it looks like they're just going to find the ones that they know will capture their interest and find a way to integrate them into the company.
Excellent, sir. So I want to thank you for your time. Is there anything you're doing online? Where can folks find you once again online?
That's right. I'm Ken Nalbone on Twitter, just at Ken Nalbone. I blog regularly for work at gestaltit.com, but the job most people know me most well for is Tech Field Day. So check out techfieldday.com. We are putting on events constantly. It is a great way to get to know enterprise companies and their products. We have really thoughtful discussions with delegates such as yourself, Paul. And I just wrapped up one here at VMworld. I'll be doing a Cloud Field Day at the end of September and many more events in the future.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. We've got a lot more great content coming up here on the ExploreVM podcast, but in the meantime, if you could do me a favor and go to iTunes and leave a review, that would really help the exposure for the podcast and hopefully help more people find our content. And as always, please follow me on Twitter at ExploreVM, facebook.com/ExploreVM, or email me, paul@ExploreVM. Once again, thank you for listening.